My name is Emily, and for 10 years my life has seemed like a mirror reflecting the same daily grind after. Every morning started with a known rhythm. The alarm clock buzzes breaking. The silence of the morning, the kitchen smells warm coffee, a consoling presence among the anarchy. David, my husband, runs about, looking nervously at his phone. The weight of the day ahead drew him towards his downtown job. Santiago. As I stood there, the doorbell echoed in the stillness, a terrible reminder of his leaving me in solitude. David embodies goodness in his very essence. He is someone I can count. Never misreading my intentions, always putting in the effort and taking his responsibilities seriously, yet there's a part of him that leaves me yearning for warmth and seems so far away and almost unreachable. Connection, it senses as though his heart is just focused on his work, leaving little space for anything else in those times we spend together. Our words usually linger in the shadows, constrained to what must be said, leaving so much unspoken between us. It feels like we are just sharing a space instead of really being a married couple. For years convinced myself that although under surface a great depth, this was simply how married life was meant to be. Invisibility stayed with me among all that was going on around us. Max, our dear boxer dog, really belongs to her, but in front of others. We welcomed him into our life. At the time he was only a small puppy. A choice taken, with hopes for him to defend our house, but for me Max was just another beloved pet, a creature to treasure and tend to. Honestly, I now see that I never really gave the time to know him. He was a quiet soul, presence that most days would calm our house and would find comfort in the garden, soaking in the sun, or curled up in his bed in the living room, lost in quiet slumber. Max and David's heart raced with delight as I hardly spoke a word. Jumped through the door eager to meet him, but my experience felt like a clear contrast. It felt as though he knew, in my reality he was only present, not really embracing life, and thus the days passed one after another. The house was in perfect order, dinner painstakingly cooked, but inside me there lingered a silence that echoed in my heart. It's amazing. Understand how something apparently everyday like a basic dog could change everything. I thought would never allow such a significant transformation from such a tiny creature. Yet I was about to see Max would grow to far more than just a pet. He became the one presence that really knew me. Though it was a morning like any other, its simplicity had quiet beauty. David had left for work just as any other day, and I discovered myself in the kitchen, fixed on my cold coffee, lost in contemplation. The silence covered me with a heavy blanket that suppressed even the soft whispers of the wind outside. Felt comfort, like a gentle hug, a great contrast to the frigidity of my own house. A great Max was there, staring at the kitchen door, enveloped in sense of presence, with those eyes that possessed a calm I had not known in what seemed to be an eternity. He stayed still in great silence, free from any sound. He stood there staring at me with a level of intensity that suggested he understood emotions I tried to express. In a moment fleeting, I felt the need to distance myself from him, but his stare held a depth that caused me to stop and discovered my heart lingering in quiet, heavy with doubt as I sought to solve the riddle of his behavior. Might it be that he actually felt the depths of my feelings and discovered that I was laughing very sincerely? A happy shake of my head reflecting the pleasure inside me. He is only a dog. Emily, kindly let us not be ridiculous. In an instant that surprises everyone, Max turned unexpectedly and rose with a deliberate slowness, headed to. I froze in place as softly rested his head against my leg. Uncertainty encircling me like a thick blanket, leaving me at loss for what to do next. In that instant, realized my hand softly stroking his head had never produced a link like this with him before. Unanticipated feeling swept over me, a whisper of comfort that repeated in my heart, reminding me I was not alone. In this instant, that modest gesture of nature had great meaning. In that brief moment that connected strongly with me in the wake of that day, I discovered myself becoming sharply conscious of the minute elements that had before escaped my grasp, like whispers in the breeze. Every time I found myself falling into the familiar hug of the sofa, Max would select spot a few steps away, his quiet tribute to the unspoken link we communicated in those quiet times, on those trying days when my tears felt like an ocean I could hardly control. I would find him peacefully by my room door. Presence was a subtle reminder that he was ready to wait, providing comfort and knowing he felt the weight of my heart. His silent companionship seemed strange, as though the universe had planned to shock me. I Had no expectations of him, yet he opened his heart, a great contrast to my experiences with David, who never seemed offering the same depth with Max. Was a constant presence that surrounded me, free from obligations, and sought a pure connection that spoke to deeply in my soul. It seemed as though he really understood my essence in a domain where I often felt invisible. He really sensed me struggling with a query that had long lurked in the margins of my consciousness, one I had never got the bravery to face. Could it be that a dog might give me something my husband has not given in such a long time? If such were the case, what would it mean? For me, a strong knot tightened in my chest, an indisputable weight of feeling that I could not release for so long. Ignored the strong impulses within me until Max softly pointed out the truth I had been dodging that morning. Stayed in my head, an echo of feelings I couldn't shake, a warmth surrounded me, a feeling so real, yet it was accompanied with an undercurrent of fear that was difficult to overlook. It's only a dog. I tried to persuade myself that my emotions were distorted and that experiencing them was illogical. Such feelings, yet every time Max turned to face me or drew near with that calm attitude, it felt as though a part of me broke and healed at once. It overwhelmed, and I couldn't get rid of the sense of stupidity for giving his so much importance on his behaviors. What was happening inside of me tried to focus on other affairs as I cleaned the dishes, and as I had always done in the past, arranged the house such that a great silence enveloped its weight. Nearly suffocating truth lay not only in the house's silence but also in the deep silence enveloped my life, echoing through my relationship with David. Everything felt hollow, as if caught in an endless cycle. I made the dinner and submerged myself in chores, and when we at last gathered around the same table, felt as though an ocean kept us apart. I felt compelled to discover a cause for it, and often reminded David seems to be buried in obligations, but what about my own? In your world, emotions and needs did not have importance. When did we start to separate like this? A wave of anxiety flooding over me at the idea of my stupidity. Then there was Max, a lighthouse in the uncertainty. That dog, in what seemed like an instant, brought me a sense of fulfillment I had been yearning for. Over the years, deep down I discovered myself struggling to accept the reality of it all. I discovered I couldn't do it, for if I were to admit it, it would indicate that my life was more deeply troubled than it should be. Truth that tore strongly on my heart, something I could not ignore. Discovered myself looking for diversion in order to occupy the silence with my creations. An attempt to ignore those ideas in search of some inner peace, but the fear persisted, a continual shadow deeply buried in my thoughts. What if it were really the case that my happiness was bound so tightly to something David could not supply, yet Max did? Just a dog. He repeated those words to me, but under surface level he understood that it was far more complicated than that. Max was never the problem he considered. Back to me all the voids I had yet to notice in my life. One afternoon I was on the couch, looking out the window, but my thoughts strayed much beyond the lost view in a cloud of ideas and emotions that seemed to blur the outside world. Day turned out exactly like many others before it. David gone from the house felt eerily quiet, and my mind whirled with unspoken ideas I was too scared about to face. In that instant I felt a strong feeling. Maximum had made his way to the couch, a moment of quiet comfort that enveloped us in peace. Among all, it was a moment that startled him, a deviation from the norm left an echo of doubt in its wake. Nestled next to me, head softly laying on my leg, a moment of quiet solace covering us that felt both sensitive and deep. I froze in place, shocked by the unanticipated compassion. As I stared at him, a deep insight came over. For the first time, he was not only a dog in my perspective. I saw a presence that really helped me. Softly stroking his head in that moment of calm connection, he answered with matched my feelings. Felt both deep and consoling. It felt like a mild release from a softening of the weight that had settled inside me, even if only momentarily. A warmth in that instant surrounded me, and for the first time in what seemed like an eternity, felt a connection that lessened the weight of solitude. Max stayed quiet, his lips sealed, his inquiry unspoken, and his once unmet before me, a quiet presence offering a gift I hadn't realized was absent from my life. In the context of our business, there reflects a strong sense of knowing. A warmth surrounded me, a feeling I had long since lost awareness of. I became lost in thought at that instant, wondering how a dog could stir such Deep feelings inside me. Why is it so difficult to reach this calm with David? That question stayed in my head like a spark, lighting all the things I had been neglecting in. That brief moment of relief Max provided begged me to consider if maybe he wasn't the only carrier of the. Perhaps the most important question I asked was not directed towards Max at all, but rather towards my own path. And knowing that afternoon in the armchair represented a turning point. Something inside me changed permanently on my heart after so many years. Years of a stirring within me begged for change. A need to flee the boundaries of a schedule that had captured my soul, and hence in a quiet moment. Reflection, I decided to start this trip with Max the next day and gently grabbed his leash, guided him for a walk in a mixture of nostalgia and expectation. The familiar hug of the surrounding park at first seemed nearly small. He walked next to me, his inquisitive nose sniffing every scent that came across his path as I kept on enveloped in a quiet reflection. Yet over time I discovered me growing more conscious of something deep Max discovered, not just during the walk itself, but in the comfort of my presence next to him. Each time my eyes landed on him, he would look up as though looking for comfort. That, as the days went by, those walks changed him. Everything was all right inside. Into the most treasured events of my day, it felt like our own small universe, a haven designed just for him and for me. There was no need for me to express my feelings or justify my silence. Max existed in that moment, a quiet presence that hung in the air. In the beginning, I discovered myself talking to him in an uncomfortable and dubious, as if I were losing my sanity talking with a dog, but in fact, those talks became for me today, Max, a healing tool. Discovered a flutter of connection that somewhat lessened my loneliness. One afternoon, as we sauntered under the sun's warm embrace, I spoke with him in that moment. Even without my words, his eyes said volumes, expressing a great knowledge that transcended language itself. Progressively, these little moments woke a sensation in me long since lost, pure unadulterated delight. I began to notice the minute elements that had passed through my hands. Lingering in the shadow of my awareness, I inhaled deeply, feeling the air is crisp and the soft rustle of leaves whispers secrets. Of course, the sun's hug warms my skin, a gentle reminder of life's basic pleasures. It was the most basic of which gave my tired soul life once more. When I got home and saw him, I was struck by an overwhelming sense of difference in the times Max focused his attention on me. Friendship and warmth. I couldn't help but note that David remained unaltered, a constant in the backdrop of my life seemed so far away, lost in the glow of his phone or the flickering images on TV, as though the world around him had vanished into nothingness. And the agony of realizing this weighed mostly on my heart, but I discovered I couldn't ignore it any longer. Max had evolved into something much beyond a pet he owned. A particular location in my heart, a real confidant from whom I could rely. Totally, and in many different ways it has evolved into my haven. Even though I couldn't fully understand it, I felt deep down that those walks contained relevance beyond his needs, meant for me. As the atmosphere changed inside their house, David started to feel the faint but one peaceful night as we sat together in, great transformations were playing out around him. He set down his fork on the plate and turned to face me. Our familiar silence set down on the plate. What is it that draws you to spend so many times outside with the dog? He asked in a way that left me unsure between the domains of inquiry and annoyance, unsure of how to react to the unspoken feeling whirling in the air. I raised my eyes, shocked by the unanticipated inquiry. It was rare for him to show any interest in my activities. There is quite soothing walking, I answered beside him, trying to keep my voice light, but deep down I felt a deeper meaning hiding behind his query. With every as the weight of unspoken emotions and unresolved conflicts seemed to grow, David began to share his ideas more often, each comment bearing a weight that seemed to hang in the air. Feels like your attention is on Max, leaving me feeling a little underappreciated. Emily is a friend and companion rather than only a dog of our life that makes us happy and warm. It's difficult to see him as anything less. I really find it strange how much importance you give him based on his words. Cut through me, leaving a sting that connected strongly, but in that suffering I discovered a clarity I had long denied David and experienced a gulf between. We descended deeper than it had ever been, and it was obvious Max was not the reason of this distance. In spite of the unresolved conflicts, gave me comfort in my walks and beloved. The quiet time spent with Max as the days passed eluded me, and believing that a quiet strength was blooming inside me and becoming more deep every moment went by. Wasn't only Max who eased my heart. The core of what those events really reflected was moment for me to gather my air and release the weight of feeling. Limited. There was an afternoon that stays in my memory, heavy and demanding. Before David left for work, we discovered ourselves enmeshed in a conflict, a moment of great emptiness hanging between us. Washed over me as though his words had siphoned away every last bit of my strength. But Max was staring at me with a calm assurance that murmured, "Don't worry, I'm here for you." As I carried, he followed a familiar pattern to the park, but in that instant he watched him sprint across the carpet of dropped leaves. A tsunami of feelings swept over me, something I hadn't gone through in what felt like an eternity, such a deep. I feel relief come over me, softly hugging my body. It seems as though the weight of the world has been taken off, leaving behind a calm stillness that connects strongly inside my soul. In that flash of insight, a tsunami of relief swept over me, and I grabbed the reality that I found, even rather than being broken beyond recovery. The smallest bits of happiness still lit my road. Max remained my best friend, my relentless constant in a world sometimes felt uncertain. Subtle movement of his tail or the reassuring manner he curled up next to me acted as a moving reminder that among the most difficult days there were that evening, a glimmer of hope and worthiness pressed strongly on David's heart. And I had hardly spoken a word all day, and when I finally plucked the confidence to reach out, he answered with only a distant gesture fading into the glow. Left me feeling more alone than ever, so I went into the room, my phone left behind. Heart heavy with an uncomfortable knot in my chest, the pain of loneliness. As I sat on the brink of the bed, a wave of sensation that had grown all too familiar sank heavily on my heart. A feeling swept over me. I felt the tears begin to trickle down my cheeks. Was something more? A quiet ache hovering in the shadow of my heart. Was that deep emptiness that slowly consumes you, leaving you feeling lost and adrift, a ghost? Reminds us of all that is lacking. In that moment, the soft echo of his footsteps arrived to find a tender nudge. Max opened something deep inside me, the door, and in that instant he moved forward with unflinching faith, making his way towards me. He settled at my feet, staring up at me exactly as he always did. His eyes glowed with the depth of knowledge, almost surreal, otherworldly, yet I stayed silent. He seemed to understand the unspoken words that stayed between us, and got up from his seat to head to bed. So rare for him, one that typically required a soft request or a gentle prod. That small gesture moved something very emotional inside me that I embraced with all of my might, letting the tears flow freely without control while I softly stroked him. A tsunami of thanks washed over me, entwined with a deep aching suffering that left me lost and not sure how to negotiate my feelings. Max found himself in silence. That felt weighty. Words caught in him, unable to release. He couldn't reassure me that everything would go according, but the core of his being said volumes. In that brief instant I came. It was incredible how much I needed this connection, and how much something as small as his presence would satisfy, turning into a lifeline for me and a source of fortitude in my fight to survive. I stayed there, nestled in his hug, a question that doggedly stayed in my head. What is it about my relationship with him that differs so greatly from what I know of David? It was a question that tormented me. It was a flash of insight, a whisper of knowledge that connected. Deep down I sensed the weight of certainty, as though the truth had been waiting patiently for me to accept what Max presented. Going beyond simple gestures were exactly what I had been missing for years. We are surrounded in a great feeling of warmth that reminds us gently of our need for attention and the pure love that nourishes our very souls. In that darkly lit room experienced a deep awareness, as if along my soul's buried portion was at last breaking apart, and I could not anymore quiet the whispers of my heart so I may pay attention to its truth. Max did not have the solution. David was not the cause of the problem. Rather, the absence caused great weight on my heart, a void left far too long to consider its importance the next days. And that night felt quite different. A spark started inside me, lighting the. In that instant, I discovered myself struggling with a strong feeling that was both brave and resigned. It was a force that really connected strongly inside me, indisputable. And one afternoon, as I stirred a pot of dinner, my hands moved nearly on their own while my thoughts drifted far away. Lost in a world of introspection as I consider the past few months and find great emotional impact from how Max lit a side of my life I thought was permanently lost to feel the great sensation of being really seen, truly heard, and sincerely loved. It is not in the language we use or the great gestures we do, but instead we provide a basic real presence to one another in the silence of that kitchen. At last I embraced a truth I had long avoided, a knowledge that had stayed in the margins of my heart for years of marriage have fallen apart. David had his own virtues, but he fell short of being the person I really needed in my life. His emotional absence caused me great emptiness, one that I didn't completely understand for some time. Seemed as though a part of my soul was absent, quietly affecting my heart and mind without awareness. Yet in that flash of clarity produced by Max, I discovered that I could not turn away anymore. Showed me the actual in his presence, the essence of pure love seems to me to be rare solace from absence of hopes for a modest release from criticisms and a release from obligations. He stands by me, presenting a gift I never felt I deserved. Moments, his presence, his empathy. As I came to terms with this truth, a great ache settled inside me, a terrible realizing David was far from providing the same in return. Became impossible for me to keep ignoring him. Emptiness was not Max's doing, or could it would be filled with slow walks or peaceful times. It was a more serious problem, one that stirred something inside. I could see a fissure that had silently sunk over the years now before me. Not easy to hide with simple explanations. As I rested against the doorframes, I stayed on David from the kitchen, a moment caught in time. As I watched his extreme disconnection, a sobering reminder of all we once knew washed over me. Shared facing this reality made me extremely urgent, as I understood it will need a complete metamorphosis of my life, but deep down I felt the weight of the moment forcing me to realize this was really a crossroads. Either I embraced it now or it would vanish permanently. I could not continue to ignore my deep yearning for love, for connection, for that vivid sensation of really being alive once more after what felt like an eternity. I at last plucked the bravery to face the truth of my life. In the still times of contemplation, I came to see that Max had taught me a great lesson. Real love does not follow uncertainty or search. It is not desperate. True love exists in its most pure form, unadorned fulfillment in the wrong places. And real, that was the very core of my aspirations, the vision I kept near to heart for my life. In the next days following, a significant metamorphosis began to play out in me. The instant I accepted the truth of my marriage and faced my actual needs with a great clarity thrown over me, one had escaped me for so long, until the first insight came to me. The problem went much beyond David. I realized it was related to the part of me I lost somewhere on this road, a version I once loved but dropped behind in my search for order. Many hours into keeping control over all around me to make sure the house felt just right to satisfy all the expectations set upon me. I still feel as though I let something important pass through my fingers, the core of my happiness. My emotions run strong, my wants and longings. Max had shown me something unlike anything else anyone else could have shown. One morning as we sauntered under the large, pristine sky, I stopped to look at him. He turned to face me, his ears alert and his eyes glowed with a great calm. I started to kneel down to thank you, Max. Your support means so much to me. I am very appreciative of your belief in me during my most trying times. Your constant support means the world to me. For telling me that I have the ability to feel still, and came to see that in that brief flash of insight I still have room for change cleaned over me, inspiring me to welcome change and follow another road it had in mind. Went beyond just asking whether David and I could save our marriage. I discovered myself struggling with the big question: could I really save? Deep within me, I sensed that I was deserving of something better, something sincere, and I realized I could not silence the cries of my heart. He grew a consistent lighthouse across my emotional mist, pointing the road ahead, the bridge which brought me back to my actual self. As I watched him sprinting happily among the dispersed leaves, me with a great awareness, realizing that this would be. As I considered my road forward towards completeness, I wondered whether it would be with David or alone. Have you ever gone to the depths of feeling I describe and found comfort in someone or something you never expected? Much like Max, I would be quite happy to hear your narrative in the comments. Should this video speak to you? Please show your gratitude by liking it, turning on the little bell, and following the channel. Won't miss more emotional tales like this one. Your support really touches. My heart motivates me to keep sharing material that speaks to you. Having a conversation with David felt like negotiating a storm, with each word weighted with my emotions. One evening following our dinner, I got up from my seat and kindly asked him to join me for a chat. In the starting, it felt as though he lost in his eyes my words had no weight and discounted me ideas as he usually was, yet this time he was resolved to face the conversation squarely and left no space for I shied away from David and spoke to him with quivering emotional voice. Time for us to talk. The weight of my situation is making life intolerable. To keep in this manner in this moment, I find myself surrounded in great sense of solitude, and it hurts greatly on my heart. It seems as though the efforts I used to believe in are erasing away, leaving me wondering everything. He looked up, a flickering of discomfort crossing his features. Would help me to grasp what you mean and where all this comes from. His voice trembles, caught in a delicate dance between incredulity and annoyance, leaving a weight in the air. Open my heart to him, sharing my ideas with honesty, embracing the truth while choosing not to assign responsibility. It was a vulnerable moment when truth collided with compassion, where I opened my heart, revealing the great emptiness that our estrangement had developed in my life. It was Max that helped me to really grasp the weight of this. His response caught me off guard and left me to consider the depths of my own. Given the dog's presence, he expressed himself and thus had expectations. With a wave of frustration, are you really implying that an animal makes you happier than I am? In that fleeting moment, a part of me wanted to withdraw, to let the conversation linger in the air unspoiled and unresolved, but I found the will to remain, to advance. In that moment, despite the weight of uncertainty, I experienced a great feeling of relevance for our discussion. Even if he couldn't understand my words, it was a crucial conversation, one that really connected not only between us but also deeply inside me. It's not about Max, David, this time, I answered with more awareness of conviction. The great knowledge he revealed for me we have to search for. Road to recover whatever still exists if it has slipped through our hands. Form, yet if we stay passive, nothing will never change. David sat in silence, unspoken words weighing heavily in the air, unsure of how to disrupt the silence engulfing him. Although the response was not inspirational, it also lacked a clear rejection. In that moment, his silence revealed a depth of feeling and intellectual ability that I could sense was sufficient for me to have a calm understanding between us, a shared space where, in that moment, words were not required. Max stayed my anchored me firmly among the turmoil that evening following our emotional conversation, and found him as he always waited patiently for me next to the bed, gently stroking his head to cause a deep understanding to flow over me. Although his trip would be full of difficulties, in that flash of insight I discovered a flutter of hope inside me, a great knowledge that I could be resilient to meet whatever came ahead. Every stride gently reminds us to welcome the road ahead. The days following our chat did not become anything remarkable, but there was unquestionably, David changed, and I started having more in-depth talks. Still, we treated them carefully, as though we were softly wading into the uncharted depths of a relationship we once understood but had since lost our path among the residual unpleasant silences and the tangible distances. There were also sensitive, although little steps suggesting hope, but inside I underwent an indisputable change. For the first time in what seemed like an eternity, David felt a change within. He came to see personally that my happiness was no longer bound only to his actions or inactions, resulting from Max's discovery of something absolutely vital for my welfare rests entirely in my own hands. My constant friend stayed anchored during those times when doubt threatened to return, and his always vigilant eye and relentless peace acted as a moving reminder of something quite valuable. I had found the courage required to really reach inside and welcome my own existence. I started to welcome experiences once felt out of reach. I commit my heart to tending to myself, finding comfort on book pages and the soft cadence of my feet there. Far more to life than just the walks with Max. Like what you heard, there's plenty more heartbreak and secrets to come. Hit like, subscribe, and stay curious with Tangled Truths.